Welcome to the Giving Garden podcast, where we explore how small acts of giving can blossom into lasting change. I'm your host, Martina Halloran, founder of the Giving Garden and CEO of Dr. Hauschka Skincare USA. In each episode, we highlight the power of giving, whether it's time, kindness, or resources, and how these acts can transform both lives and whole communities. Join me as we explore the ripple effect of giving and its lasting impact. In today's episode, I'm excited to share my conversation with one of the partners of the Giving Garden Loyalty Program, Alameda County Community Food Bank, and their Director of Community Engagement and Marketing, Michael Altfest. Michael's leadership has been instrumental in amplifying the food bank's mission to end hunger in Alameda County. Through innovative partnerships, impactful advocacy, and a steadfast commitment to serving others, he's helped build a stronger, more nourished community where no one has to worry about their next meal. The Alameda County Community Food Bank is no stranger to impactful work. They collaborate with over 400 agencies, and over 50% of the food distributed by ACCFB consists of fresh produce sourced from California farms. This focus on fresh fruits and vegetables aligns with promoting healthy eating habits and supports local agriculture. The organization goes beyond food distribution to tackle the root causes of hunger. Michael's role is pivotal in driving this mission forward, from fostering community engagement to spearheading public awareness campaigns and advocacy efforts. Today, we'll dive into Michael's journey, the inspiring work of ACCFB, and how we can all contribute to a world where everyone thrives. Michael, welcome to the Giving Garden podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really honored to be here.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the work that not only yourself, but your organization does, because it's important, it's powerful, and it's meaningful. But before we dive into what the Alameda County Community Food Bank is all about, I'd like to hear a little bit more about you and in what was the impetus or the inflection point in your life, in your professional journey that led you to do advocacy work within food insecurity and hunger awareness. I would love to hear a little bit about it, and I know that our audience would love to as well.
Well, my journey starts all the way back to childhood. I am the grandson of civil servants, World War II vets. My grandfather was a rescue diver in the Navy. My grandmother was one of the original WAVES, the women accepted for volunteer emergency service. Grew up in San Diego, so I was always exposed to all of the Navy presence down there. So I kind of always had this calling to serve, just based off of just where I grew up and my family. The other side of my family, they are refugees from Eastern Europe. They escaped pogroms in Poland after World War I, and just kind of that lived experience has always sat with me. I kind of took a roundabout route to getting into actual public service. Ended up, my career path took me through a potential career in the music industry and into sports marketing and into kind of traditional public relations. And through all of that was, that underlying theme was really about putting things out there and getting people to sort of react and engage in it. So I really liked doing that work. And then one day I found myself kind of accidentally doing crisis communications, and it just turned out I was good at that and just sort of stumbled into it. One thing led to another, and there's a fun story there where I was doing work for one of our local animal welfare organizations. And this story happened where a cat had been actually kidnapped from a shelter, and it had somehow been found across the country in New York City, I believe. And they orchestrated the return of this cat with one of our local airlines here. So it was one of those stories where, we found the kidnapped kitten, and it was a partially blind kitten, by the way. And this airline is going to jump in and they're going to help bring the kitten back to San Francisco.
Sounds like a movie.
It should be a movie. The cat's name, by the way, is Jack Daniels. So, and when this originally was presented to me, it just happened to be that I was doing work for this animal welfare organization. And when this originally came my way, I kind of turned my nose up at it. I was like, well, what's the value in this story? And because I was doing crisis work and reputation work, and I was doing, these very high level things, and this just seemed at first glance, I was like, well, this seems a little, superfluous. And then I saw the result of what had happened when all of these news cameras showed up at the airport and this ended up on the news, and just seeing how powerful the story itself was and the partnership working with this airline and everything, and just how much that inspired people to
Mm,
pay attention to an organization like an animal welfare organization and to jump in and want to support it. That was that moment in my life where I was like, wow, there's something here that,
mm,
I can see my sort of different parts of my life converging. I was doing a little bit of other work for some other nonprofits, not in any kind of like social service sector, but that was the moment where I just started to look around. I was like, there's something more I can do with my life. This is 15 years ago now, but I started to look around, and there was a position open at our food bank, and it was just a communications position. It was just doing what I did. But I started to look into this organization and was really impressed and pretty surprised about what our food bank was all about. It wasn't just about handing out food. There was a heavy
mm,
advocacy component. The history of our nutrition work was just mind-blowing. And I think just the process of me applying for the position, I learned so much more about hunger relief, which, at the time was very kind of charity model based.
mhm.
And I
Yep.
didn't realize how just deeper that work was. And I just immediately fell in love with the organization. Thankfully, they fell in love with me. And
That's awesome.
I,
We have a cat to thank for that.
yes, we do.
Um,
Thank you, Jack Daniels.
that is so awesome. And one of the things that when we were thinking about bringing on Alameda as a partner, you said something important. The approach to people who are receiving support and sustenance and nourishment from food banks and like organizations, Alameda approached it with a level of dignity. And in my
Yes.
personal story, I was a kid that experienced food insecurity for many different times in my life. And I had the benefit of the free lunch program when the free lunch program first started in schools, 35, almost 40 years ago. So I'm going to really date myself. But I think one of the things that was so interesting to me was it was about whole health and the whole human and a level of dignity. And there is no shame in not being able to feed yourself and or your family. And Alameda seemed to approach it from a whole human perspective. And I found that so inspiring and in many ways comforting, because I think it can be very difficult for people who need support and nourishment. And that's the symptom, right? That's the very first thing that they need. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit more. Alameda County Community Food Bank is doing so much. Can you tell us the bigger picture of what they're all about in the community and how the program works and how you work within that?
Yeah, be happy to. And like you said, we do a lot. So I'm going to kind of split this up into sort of two different parts here. There's traditional food banking, what people typically know of when they open up a newspaper and they see a story about food banking. We are pretty much a hub. If you come to our facility, you're going to see what looks pretty familiar because it's going to look almost like a Costco. We've got stacks and stacks and stacks and giant coolers and everything. And there's a million to 2 million pounds of food just sitting in our facility. It's 118,000 square feet. I mean, you could fit a couple football fields in this facility. And through that facility, every week, about 1 million pounds of food is going to flow in and out of there. As you noted, we've got close to 400 partners. So those partners are typically what people may call food pantries or soup kitchens. Modern term for
Mhm.
that might be like a meal program. And then there's a lot of other programs that may be kind of on smaller scale. So a school, a senior shelter, a child care facility, a hospital, other places where people may be getting food assistance. And those are the partner agencies that we're working with. We're procuring the food for them. They're getting the food. They might either pick it up from us or we may deliver it. So it's really this flow of food. You also pointed out about half of what we provide. It's actually now more than half of what
Mhm.
we provide is farm fresh produce. So we're talking about 50 million meals worth of food. going in and out of that facility every year. About 25 million pounds of that is farm fresh produce. We do have a heavy focus on the most nutritious food possible. Us being in Alameda County, so Alameda County is the home of Oakland and Berkeley. It's in the
Hmm.
Bay Area. It is an extremely diverse area. So a big focus of ours also is culturally relevant food. So it's a lot of work just to kind of keep that core food banking work, moving. The other side of that is sort of the upstream work, so to speak. So you've noted that we've been doing advocacy, so like really like policy change work for more than 20 years. We've got, I have to imagine, one of, if not the largest, kind of most involved policy change and advocacy teams in the entire Feeding America network. So we're working 365 days with all levels of government, local,
Hmm.
county, state, federal, to lobby for, to create, to protect policies that help people and help communities that are facing poverty or food insecurity. We also have California's first and largest CalFresh outreach department.
Hmm.
CalFresh is the California name for what people may commonly call the federal food stamp program.
Yes.
That is something that, in fact, our chief impact officer, she created that program 21 years ago now, maybe 22 years ago. And that is a very close partnership for outreach and enrollment for families who will qualify for CalFresh assistance. A lot of nutrition programs, a lot of work that is going around and kind of both improving the way that we do the work and also hopefully shortening the line. Ideally, we'd like to go out of business one day.
Yeah.
So while we're serving that line of people getting food, we're also trying to shorten that line.
When you think about the diverse population that you serve, over indexing in things such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, and that really comes from nutrition. It's not because people are not trying to live a better life, it's really access. And when I think about the tremendous access you're creating, we often don't realize access is not just financial, it's geographic. So the fact that you're working with all of these networks and meeting people where they are, whether it's daycare centers, schools, hospitals, you name so many different locales that you actually are supporting because communities are accessing food support in so many different places. There's all of these layers, which then means there's all of these entry points for other people to join the effort and to give their time or resource or mind share to really help. Because ultimately, that's the goal, that creating self reliant humans and self reliant communities through food access is really ultimately the goal.
You use that word access, and I think that's possibly the most important word that we could discuss today. There is more than enough food in the world and in this country for people to be nourished. That is just a pure fact. Where the problem lies is in access to that. And that can mean a number of things. And this is really where we start to look at food as a justice issue. It has long been looked at as a charity,
Mm-hmm.
this work that we've done. And our organization is currently right in the midst of our own evolution, moving away from a charity model or a purely charity model and evolving into justice. Most people, myself included, until I got into this work, probably take for granted just how simple getting food might be. If you are employed and you live within, driving distance of a grocery store, I myself can leave my home and I can walk to our local grocery store. It takes me about 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I can go and pretty much buy whatever I want. I don't put much thought into it. Granted, food prices have gone up in the last couple of years and everything, and like that's an issue that we're all facing. But imagine that just being so pronounced if you are in
Yeah.
such a tight budget. Making sure that people have convenient access to healthy food is at the core of this. Pardon the pun, because I just said core, but I mean, if you go and compare what a bag of apples is at a grocery store to what a cost of a Happy Meal is at a fast food restaurant or something like that, you're going to see probably similar prices, right? And,
Right.
it is very easy to say, I got a limited budget. I need to make sure that my child has nourishment to get through this day, to get to school.
Mm-hmm.
And your most accessible options are the least healthy. So that is really what we're about, right? It was 22 years ago when our former executive director looked at our warehouse, saw that our food bank was still distributing soda, as most food banks, if not all food banks, were at the time. And she
Hmm.
said, no, we can't do this. This is not helping the community. And said, we're getting rid of that. And our board of directors, they got behind her, but they had to ask that question, like, well, what are you gonna, how are you gonna replace that? What are you gonna do? Because food banks at the time were pretty much judged on the amount of pounds that they put out. And she said, well, we'll do it with farm fresh produce. That was 1 million pounds. And at the time, it was a very like
My
groundbreaking,
kind of
boundary pushing
gal.
thing. Yeah. So, and at the time, it was maybe a bit of a challenge, and it was boundary pushing, it was innovative and everything. And it's very, very just core to food banking now. Like we made a big change and we said, look, we need to do this. And that has driven so much of the work that we've done. You brought up school meals. I think that is a critical piece of this too. School meals are now in the California state budget. They're universal for
Hmm.
California public schools. So any child who goes to a California public school can get a free school meal. It is impossible to overstate just how critical that is, both just because of the access, right? So a child who's going to school can get a
Hmm.
healthy meal. And another critical point there too is the stigma of that. Hunger relief has
Yeah.
long been kind of an othering, like, oh, there's a line. Or I remember when I was in school, it
You had
was
it
clear.
was a different
It was
colored
a,
lunch ticket. I had a
yes, it
different
was,
colored lunch ticket.
yeah.
And so everybody knew, and you
Yes.
would try and like hide it in your pocket because there was such shame and stigma associated with getting a free lunch.
Any child in that line, they're all getting it. That stigma is gone. And it's encouraging to me, it's heartwarming to me. It's some days that my own son, he's like, can I have school lunch today? It's like, yes, absolutely. You're like, I would, and just knowing that like he can take advantage of that, that lifts a burden on me too.
I think it's really important when kids go to school, everybody has the same footing to have the opportunity to really learn and take in the information. And they're not there sitting next to their friend who has this really robust lunch and they don't have a lunch or they have minimal. And I think that when you come back to the conversation that we were having earlier about the justice piece of it, I believe access to fresh fruits, vegetables, good, healthy nutrition is a fundamental human right.
Yes.
And people can argue with me. And I think that is an opinion that they will not change because when you talk about the dignity of human existence, to be able to feed and house and clothe yourself are ways people move through life with dignity. And then there's this whole cycle of events, whether you're in a community that is really considered a food desert, and then you're shopping at a bodega or a convenience store, or to your point, getting a fast food meal because you have a limited budget. It's really a recipe for disaster for overall health. When you think about the long term implications of children at the very onset of really getting into their critical formative years, not having access on a regular basis to healthy food sources is really incredible when you think of the country that we live in. And one of the things that is, I think, is really powerful is the sheer numbers. I think it's important for our audience to understand the numbers, the number of people that you support, because I think people will be a little surprised at how big the need is.
Yes, the need is quite large, and particularly in our area. The Bay Area is a very, very expensive place to live. The cost of living, it's practically prohibitive for,
Mm.
most people unless they're extremely wealthy. Our area, we're estimating between about 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. So 20 to 25% of people in Alameda County do experience some level of food insecurity. That ranges. So there's people who will depend on us for essentially their entire nutrition,
Mm.
365 days a year. That might be somebody, as an example, like a senior who's living on a fixed income. Most of that income is going to their housing,
Housing.
medical, and everything. So they can turn to us and we can make sure that that piece is taken care of. On the other side of it, and we've seen a shift in the last, say, 5 years, particularly over the course of the pandemic, is somebody who would never identify as food insecure. They maybe have a moderate income, or in most places maybe even considered a decent income. But here in the Bay Area,
Mm.
Rent eats first. You got to keep the lights on. You got to put food, you got to put gas in your car. You got to have the utilities and everything. And then maybe, you get paid on Friday, but it's Wednesday and you open up the fridge and there's not a lot in there. So maybe you wait a few days to go grocery shopping. You have an unhealthy meal, you pop a, microwave burrito in the fridge or in the microwave or something like that. You kind of making those choices that maybe you're not identifying as food insecurity, but like those are parts of food insecurity, right? Like I can't consistently afford healthy food. So before the pandemic, before people really, really, really knew
Mm.
just sort of the impact of food banks, that person maybe would not have reached out. And because of the pandemic, as odd as it is to say there might be a silver lining there, a lot more people realize that they have this
Yeah.
resource. So you don't have to make that decision of, can I go to the grocery store or can I access healthy food or do I have to pay my PG&E bill to keep the lights on?
Right.
You can do both now because you pay the bill and then there's a source of healthy food. In our instance, pretty much anywhere in our county, which is a fairly large county, you can access food probably within about a mile of your home. And that would be even in what would, people would consider as some of the more wealthier parts
Hmm.
of the county, making sure that people have that access. And
Yes.
what we say here, right place, right food, right time, like that is a core piece of what makes this a justice issue. You shouldn't
Yeah.
have to take a
Yep.
bus and then transfer to another bus to go to the grocery store and spend your last $12 on a microwave pizza.
People through the pandemic understood that the resource was there. But I also think that the audience that does not need the service and the support became aware. I don't think people really recognized the depths. I think there's a mentality at times where it's those people, that it's they're not realizing they are going to work with people that cannot feed their families. They are riding the bus or they are passing people that, from their perspective, that person's got it all together. And they're not recognizing how profound the issue is in the United States.
Hunger is among the most just critical hidden problems, right? And your point is spot on. We all know somebody right now who is experiencing food insecurity, and we probably don't know it. We don't know what people are going through. You can be quick to judge. I think we all kind of do it. Oh, that person's driving a nice car, or they live in my neighborhood, and we may
Hmm.
not know what else is going on. They may have crippling medical debt, as an example.
Right.
That is a part of our country that is, that is that needs some fixing itself. And if people are really underwater or they're experiencing something that we don't know, the last thing people are going to do is raise their hand and say, "Hey, guess what? I don't have enough money for food." Unfortunately, and this is something that we've experienced a lot, I've seen it myself. Food insecurity carries still to this day such a huge stigma, and people are often really scared and embarrassed. And
Yeah.
the saddest part about this, the hardest part is when people are really apologetic when they reach out. People think that they're imposing. So,
Yeah.
people they will do everything. They will sell their furniture before they call
Hmm.
our emergency food helpline because of that stigma. And it's just it's almost hard to put words to what happens, just sort of that change when somebody they call our emergency food helpline and they say, you know what, like I really feel like I should have called weeks ago. And they go from that level of just fear, embarrassment, everything. And then my coworkers, or the volunteers who work on our emergency food helpline,
Mm.
they are assuring and I've seen it. I've seen it myself watching a volunteer on the phone walking somebody through the steps. All right, go to this corner, get on this bus. I'm going to stay on the phone with you until you get there. And by the time they get there, that food pantry, they knew that they were coming. They were waiting for
Hmm.
them. Here's this bag of food, and and it's great food. It will be fresh produce. It could be eggs. It could be chicken. It'll be peanut butter. It's high quality food, and the relief that
I was
that
just going to
person
say that
has
that
is
relief must be so overwhelming. And there is definitely this stigma that still follows. I mean, fast forward 40 years. I don't think it was but 2 years ago that people really knew my story. And it makes people uncomfortable. Part of the goal in me having a conversation like this with you is to really normalize the conversation. Because to your point, asking for that type of help often comes with judgment that you've done something wrong or your life has gone awry in a way that you could have prevented. And that's not true. It simply isn't true. And from a society perspective, we need to have a level of care for people. I am so hopeful when I have conversations like this and listen, really listen and understand the level that you're working at and all of the layers that are creating this wraparound of community support. I can imagine that you must have an army of people, or not. The idea of volunteering is very, very prevalent for people. But I think a lot of times people don't understand, like, how do I get involved or how do I volunteer? So I have a couple of questions. How many volunteers make your whole organization go every day? And then is there a program? Is there an outreach program to get more people to volunteer? And is it relatively easy for somebody to step in and start training or working with you to be a volunteer?
We cannot do the work we do without volunteers. That is just a pure, simple fact. So I threw a lot of numbers out earlier. So, imagine about 60 million pounds of food flowing through our facility. That food is going to 360 some odd partner agencies. We've got a fleet of 12 or so trucks that are going in and out of the facility. I mean, it is a massive logistics operation. And we're doing that with 150 staff. And that's every level of staff. I mean, we're talking security guards, fundraisers, nutrition, nutrition education, advocacy, and everything. And the operations part of it is just a small part. We, in this last year, welcomed 14,000 volunteers for our
Wow.
work. Yes. I
Wow,
mean, it was,
that's insane.
yeah,
Wow, bravo.
yeah, we're
Wow.
so grateful to have a community that jumps in, is just so willing to help. We have a very compassionate community. It's great living in a place like Alameda County where people kind of live here because they are altruistic in many cases. So being civically minded and everything, we benefit from that. But I see it all across the country. People really want to jump in and help with food banks. So, on a given day, we do 2 shifts. On most days, we're open 5 or 6 days a week, depending on the weekend. And we'll have anywhere between 50 and 100 people. We just did a massive day of service on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We had almost 350 volunteers come in that day.
Wow.
It was our
Wow.
largest volunteer day that we've ever had in 40 years of the food bank.
Wow.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about
Incredible.
the vibe in there. So yeah,
Yeah.
volunteering is super easy and it's really, really impactful. And most importantly, it's so fun. Most of those 14,000 are going to come in for one day every year. It's often they'll come in with their companies, their schools. In 3 hours, you will be part of an effort that will prepare a roughly 20,000 pounds worth of food. So we're getting food
Wow.
directly from farms, or we're getting food drive food. That's coming in bulk. So you got to imagine a warehouse just full of bulk food items, and volunteers are taking that and say you're standing over a bin of apples and you're turning it into a bag of apples just like you would get at a grocery store, for example. Or we're going through our food drive collections and we're sorting out foods, and the canned vegetables are going over here, the juice is going over here, and building boxes. So there's a lot of work that gets done, and in 3 hours you're having a huge impact. We try to remind every single volunteer that comes through that apple that they are holding in that moment is going to be in somebody's refrigerator within a day or two. That's going to end up, going through those partner agencies. It's going to be distributed, and a child, a senior, a family, they're going to get nourished because of that food. For people who want to volunteer, it's simple. I mean, you could pretty much go to any food bank website. I'm guessing any food bank website. And if you don't know your local food bank, you can go through the Feeding America website. They'll help you locate your local food bank. And we are all largely volunteer driven. So it's pretty easy. There's going to be a volunteer button right on our website, which is accfb.org. You can sign up as an individual. You can sign up as a group, and we have a number of volunteers who come regularly. So we've
Mm.
got volunteers who have created relationships and friendships
Right.
and friend groups and like just lifelong connections because they're there.
It
It's
sounds like you have such a committed group of volunteers, but a committed community. I mean,
yes.
community is what really makes things happen. And when I think about that, how do you raise awareness outside of your community? Because I think it is a little bit about that snowball effect. How do we keep having the conversations and build awareness so there's a broader audience of support, if you will?
Any means that we can get the word out, we do. We'll be in the news a lot. If there's issues that are out there, we'll do the media pitch and we will get the news out about our work. But it kind of ultimately just boils down to partnerships. We
Yeah.
don't do this work in isolation by any means. So we've got like-minded
Mhm.
organizations who may be in the housing space or other justice spaces or anti-racist spaces, or you can look at government partnerships. We've got our tentacles, so to speak, sort of in every corner of our community.
We keep saying partnerships, but what do some of them look like? I know you have so many of them, and I think our audience would love to understand some of the groups that you work with.
Yeah, I mean, if you come to mind, one partnership, for example, would be with our Alameda County Social Services Department. So we partner directly with them on that CalFresh outreach.
Mhm.
So we've got our staff on site, and then there's the social services staff with Alameda County. They work very, very closely. We can, submit applications directly from our food bank. So that's a perfect example of so where like a public or private partnership plays a huge role. We've got really strong relationships with, well, a lot of schools, every single university, every single
Oh,
college of every size, throughout Alameda County. So whether it's a community college or all the way up to like University of California,
mhm.
Berkeley. So we have partnerships with those. I think one of the, newer partnerships that a lot of people are really interested in is with Stephen and Aisha Curry's Eat, Learn, Play Foundation. So those who don't
Mhm.
know, Stephen Curry is one of the
Yeah.
most famous NBA players, and his wife Aisha is a very well-known restaurant owner, chef, cookbook author. They are, among the top power couples in the entire country. And they are extraordinarily generous and wonderful people.
Uh,
They've got their own foundation, which is called Eat, Learn, Play, which, as the name may suggest, is focused on childhood literacy, activity, and
mhm.
nutrition. They've got the coolest old school bus that
I've
they have
seen it.
transformed into.
It
Yeah,
is
so
very, very cool. And it looks like it's a lot
yeah.
of fun too.
It is really cool. And, we've talked a lot about stigma. That is a big part of that. That bus shows up to a playground, a school, an event, and kids come flocking to it. We could sit here and describe it. I encourage people to go look at it. The art on the bus was done by very prominent street artists here,
Mhm.
muralists called the Luminaries, excuse me. That partnership. So, if you look at the interconnectedness of all of this,
Yeah.
children make up the biggest group that we serve, probably most food banks serve. So we take care of a lot of the hunger relief element of that. But the entire organization, then again, there's the literacy part. So that bus pulls up, it might pull up to a playground. There's activity that happens with that. The children can get food, and then they're also getting age appropriate books. So it's a full interconnected effort there.
How do you take that idea within your organization and ladder it up to the parents and the adults in terms of educational resources or programs that really help people make the best decisions that they can with the food resources that they have? Do you have programs within your wraparound services that helps people kind of navigate the world of cooking or selecting or
Yeah.
what have you?
So whether it be through that partnership or other work that we're doing, we have a nutrition education team that does actually create recipes that are entirely based in the food that we provide at the food bank.
Oh, that's
I,
that's fantastic.
if I were to walk into my kitchen right now, I've got a giant binder of just my like recipes that have been handed down through generations or from food banks. I to this day will actually cook in my own kitchen stuff that I've gotten from our nutrition education department because it's surprisingly easy to eat very healthy and have it taste really good. You don't have to load it with a bunch of butter and sugar and salt and everything. There are a lot of things that, you can just
Well, I
get at
think
a
you
food
said
bank. And
something really important. A lot of people don't realize that there is a simplicity to eating really healthy and well. And sometimes that simplicity can really nourish you. And I think that's an educational piece. We often say at Dr. Hauschka, we meet people where they're at. And it sounds like your organization is really able to meet people where they're at, not just socially, geographically, financially, but culturally as well. And I think that's important that people feel a sense of dignity. And it sounds like your organization really tries to simplify things in the process so people aren't overwhelmed or they don't get discouraged and then walk away. I did not know that you had an emergency hotline, and that is really incredible.
yes, and that is really what food banks have historically been. We have been emergency response organizations. So we maybe not think of, an individual experiencing food insecurity in a one-time instance as an emergency, but it very much is, but or we've talked about COVID or here in California, we are facing a lot of fires in the
Mhm.
south. People are facing, destructive hurricanes. It's just a matter of time here in California before we have another major earthquake. And these are those instances, whether they're happening in a situational basis or a systemic basis, and it largely is systemic, but they are emergency situations. I
Mhm.
am going through life and I have a situation right now where I'm unable to do something that is a basic need, and to your point, a basic right. That's where we jump in. So people are, when they're calling our emergency food helpline, it usually means I need groceries right now. I need a
Right.
hot meal right now. And that's what we are making sure that we're doing in that moment. And then on the other side, we are making sure that we're kind of building systems or, tearing down systems and rebuilding
Mhm.
those systems so that people do not need to call us in the
In an
future.
emergency situation. Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid those emergency situations to begin with. Now, we will never get rid of those, right? Emergencies are always going to exist, but when we're talking about hunger, we are talking about it largely as a systemic issue.
When you think about that as a systemic issue, is there anything specifically that you and your organization are working on now from an advocacy perspective? I know that you're doing a lot of government work, but what's kind of the in the immediate horizon in terms of advocacy right now?
Yeah, so I'm going to break this down a little bit and it kind of helps to give the context. Historically, our advocacy and policy change work was rooted largely in nutrition benefits.
Mhm.
And so CalFresh, SNAP, known as the Federal
Mhm.
Food Stamp Program, that is within a giant piece of legislation, federal legislation called the Farm Bill.
Mhm.
So a lot of people kind of hear the Farm Bill. I don't blame anybody if they kind of just gloss over that and they don't think too much about it, but it is a massive, massive piece of legislation that gets reauthorized every handful of years at the US government level. Yes, it pays for farm subsidies and so forth, but also built within that is the federal funding for the food
Mhm.
stamp program. So, it may be something like that we've historically been involved in. And we are starting to, particularly in the last couple of years, starting to sort of spread out. There may be things that are a little bit more tangentially related to hunger that you may see us get involved in, say, for instance, lobbying to increase minimum wage,
Mm.
right? Or, so that one's obvious, right? More money in people's pockets means they can afford more food. We may also get involved on tax issues because, one of the problems that we face here in California, there's will. I think there's plenty of political will to solve a lot of these problems. What California does not have is enough money to fund these programs. So just, I mean, the fact that we got universal school meals funded in the California state budget is nearly miraculous because California is so hamstrung by our own tax structure. So people may scratch their heads like, why is the food bank advocating for these tax policy changes? And it's because the state can't do anything if it doesn't have revenue. But then you'll start to look at larger, more kind of systemic things. Like one thing that we've been working on for the last couple of years is trying to lower the barrier, expand nutrition access to people regardless of their immigration status. This is when we're starting to get into really like anti-racist work and everything.
Mm.
there is no reason why somebody shouldn't be able to access food,
Yes.
particularly their immigration status, or regardless of age or those sorts of things. So we'll start to do that. We'll probably begin working a lot more
Mhm.
on things that do address the systemic causes of hunger. And I know, it's often a shock to the system when people hear this for the first time, but hunger and poverty really are race issues. In our county alone, 7 out of 10 people who are facing poverty are people of color. That did not happen by accident. It did not happen overnight. It is not coincidental. It goes back years and years. I mean, to the founding of this country, that this is a race issue. And when we say the word racism, we're not, talking necessarily about that traditional sort of like, hey, there's a white supremacist who's hates people of color. It's much deeper than this. There is policies that have been, rooted into the structure of this country. We're talking redlining and all of the sorts of things that
Hmm.
have caused this problem and worsened it and made it nearly impossible for historically marginalized communities to overcome. The like poverty, we know, is a very generational issue. There's,
Hmm.
the generation wealth gap is, it's comically large.
Mike, is this where we say drop the mic? Because that's just, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many realities that are involved with this. And to your point, people can gloss over things when they're not understanding like the inherent issues. And I think it's so layered. The impetus, for me for the conversation today is twofold. One, giving people some perspective as to how your organization works and how they might seek to volunteer, support, give to an organization that's a little bit more localized for themselves. And then to really understand an organization such as yours is how do we better understand how do we do the most good for a food bank? And like what are your immediate needs?
If somebody's just first wanting to engage in the food bank, I would tell them to do the thing that they would find most meaningful in that moment. Start there. Do what's within your means. In my ideal world, every single person in our community, they would be volunteering, they would be donating money, they would be donating food, they would be advocating, they would be educating themselves and becoming anti-racists and understanding the root causes of this. I realize that is not a
That's
reasonable
a
request
tall order,
necessarily. That is a
Mike.
tall order. So, but sometimes people, their best way in is to put a jar of peanut butter in a food drive barrel. Sometimes people want to come in, get their hands on that food and pack something, it's a great team building experience to volunteer. Sometimes people, they really want to help, and the best thing that they can do is write a check. If I had to say, the number one most important thing, it is financial donations. One thing that a place where food banks have evolved and changed a lot in the last decade is where we source our food. We don't actually get a lot of donated food anymore, at least relative to the size of the organization that
Hmm.
we have become. We still do get plenty of it, but it's not the primary source. The primary way we get food is we purchase it. Our food bank, either just in the pure bulk that we get, or when we combine our efforts with all of the food banks in our region or statewide, are able to get massive amount of food for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
So, you
Economies
go to
of
the store.
scale. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
exactly.
Yeah.
You go to the store and you are going to buy a bag of apples for $5, $10, right? We can get a pound of apples for about 12 cents, and that's just the VAT fee. So every dollar that you donate to a food bank like ours,
Yeah.
we'll distribute roughly like 2 meals worth of food. So it's a couple pounds worth of food. So that is a great place to start. My hope, and I think our hope, is that somebody takes that first step and understands their impact and wants to do more. If you donate to our food bank, one of the first things that we're going to say to you is, hey, will you come in and volunteer? Like, we want people to see the impact of their food. If they're volunteering, we'll do this particularly during times where we've got important legislative asks.
Hmm.
So our volunteers will be on site, and if we need the governor to sign the budget, sign a bill or something like that, we will stop everybody in the middle of the shift. We'll say, hey, guess what, everybody? There is a bill sitting on Governor Newsom's desk right now that is imperative for it to pass. It will make a huge impact on hunger in our community. Will you please scan this QR code and send a note to the governor saying, I support this. Will you please sign it? And that's where I come in. That's where my work really is trying to build the engagement. I've never seen a single instance where somebody has come and engaged with our work and said, nah, this isn't for me. They come and they engage with this work and they see, wow, I'm making an enormous impact. And when people really start to see there's that saying, the rising tide lifts all boats.
Mm,
It's, we've
yeah.
we've often looked at hunger relief as sort of this one-way channel. I'm going to give something and it's going to help a person. And it's much, much greater than that. People, when you are helping lift up this community, it's helping all of us.
Well, it's
So,
grounded in
yeah.
reciprocity. Giving is very cyclical and there's a reciprocal aspect to it. You sound so hopeful still, um, that I appreciate that because with the conversation we've just had, giving is at the core of this podcast, and we've talked about this massive need to give, if you will, whether it's your time or your resources, financially, physically, with food. But you sound so hopeful still, and that inspires me, that given what you're working towards and giving what you see every single day and the sheer number of people that you're supporting on a daily basis, can feel daunting, can feel discouraging, but you sound so hopeful. So I'm going to
You know,
ask you, are you hopeful?
I'm very hopeful. We've got 5 values at our food bank. The last one is hope. We're talking belonging, accountability, community, transparency, hope. And we can't lose hope. I mean, this problem has gotten worse in the last couple of years. It has not really gotten better since COVID,
Mm.
when we saw most food banks our size pretty much double in size and scope, and we see the need. And the political climate for as long as I've been doing this has been very volatile. There's so much that we cannot control as an organization, but I see those 14,000 volunteers come in. I see all of my coworkers who are just amazing human beings who are experts in what they do. And we say this a lot, and if you can end hunger anywhere, we believe it's in Alameda County. We have the resources, we have the right political will, we have a community that is willing to step up and support this. And we've done such a tremendous job
Mm.
of addressing the need that has been in front of us. And I've seen in real time, we talked about, say, California school meals. We've seen that change happen over time, that there's no reason to not be hopeful. There's no reason to not believe. It does not change the fact, like you said, it is daunting. There's a massive, massive wall sitting in front of us, but we've got enough pickaxes to start chipping away at that thing. And if we can really start to put in place the things that our food bank is working on right now and really becoming a justice focused organization. I firmly believe it goes beyond hope, but I firmly believe that we're going to start to see some real change here in the coming years. We know people want it, we know people need it,
Yeah.
and we know how to do it.
Thank you. Not only for the conversation, but the information, but really the work that your organization and you are doing is so massive and so important and so powerful, and that change can happen.
Yes.
I want to make sure our audience understands how to really connect with the Alameda County Community Food Bank, and that if they're interested in connecting or supporting or helping you, where would they go to connect with you?
Best place would be our website, which is ACCFB, that is Alameda County Community Food Bank. We are part of both the California Association of Food Banks and Feeding America, which is the nation's network of food banks. There's 200 food banks that operate similar to ours that cover the entire country. So really do encourage people to check out their own food bank. The issue of hunger, while it is, you're going to find it in every single community. It may be, manifesting a little bit differently, or the approach to alleviating. Is this, can we do this as an edit?
We'll certainly do this as an edit.
Yeah, so I would also encourage people to, check out Feeding America to find their own local food bank. We're all local organizations, so if somebody's listening to this in any other part of the country, do please reach out and support your own local food bank. Although, we do love when people it happens occasionally. We'll get, people reaching out from across the country saying, hey, I heard this or I saw this, something like that. We want to support you. But, we do want people to support their own local food banks as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Giving Garden podcast. I hope you're leaving inspired, because even the smallest act can spark positive change. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. The Giving Garden podcast is produced by Edwin Batista and edited by Stephen West. A special thanks to Helen Polisi for her guidance and generosity. The Giving Garden podcast is brought to you by Dr. Hauschka Skincare USA, pioneers in natural skincare for over 50 years, and home to the Giving Garden loyalty program. Visit drhauschka.com to learn more.